You're listening to a podcast by the Center for Action and Contemplation. To learn more, visit cac.org.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jacqui Lewis, and this is Love Period, a podcast about how to love ourselves, our posse, and the world fiercely, on the way to making the world better. Today, my guest is the Reverend Darrell Hamilton. He is an ordained Baptist minister. He's a writer, and he's a poet and a revolutionary. He also happens to be one of the executive ministers at Middle Collegiate Church, a job he began in January of 2021. Darrell, thanks for coming today. Welcome.
So glad to be here, Jackie. Thank you.
I'm so glad you joined our team at Middle Church. Can you tell the folks who are listening what that's been like for you? You joined the staff, Darrell, in COVID, and then we had a fire. What's this journey to Middle Church been like for you?
Oh man, that's really a great question. I have the image of fire in my mind right now. Fire in a way that is also refining, a way that is enlightening, also in a way that is scolding. And so I feel like there's been a lot of fire in the transition here. I have no doubt in my mind that my calling to this church was God-led. Again, there's some reference in scripture too about God guiding by a pillar of fire, and so most definitely do I feel led here by fire in a time of fire. Am I being warmed by the fire? Your fierce fire, Jackie, as a leader. I'm being enlightened by the fire in ways in which I might not know every which way that I'm going, but shining light sort of into the darkness, into the uncertainty, into the questions. And I'm being scolded by the fire because I am being stretched and I am being challenged in some new ways, which is really, really important. And again, fire also refines. And so it's very refining as well. And so I know there is a work that God is doing at this time. And so I'm just really grateful that I was willing to say yes to the call and the move of the Spirit.
I'm so glad that you said yes. I really am. And I love the way you're reflecting on all these different ways that fire is part of this calling, right? The leading, the enlightening, the shaping, the refining. And I just want to say that I am thrilled to have you as a colleague. Young Black man called to a multi-ethnic situation. As we're talking, we're right on the day that commemorates 100 years since the Tulsa massacre, and that's your home. Darrell, talk to us about that kind of fire. Talk about the fire of that oppression, the fire of that wounding.
Yeah, thank you for that good question. Yeah, and so just for everybody listening, so I'm born and raised Oklahoma City. More specifically a suburb, Edmond, Oklahoma. And so Tulsa, Oklahoma is literally an hour and a half up the highway. And so very much so has I don't want to say the story, but the narrative of the Tulsa race massacre, of Black Wall Street. That's a history that I've always known and been taught, not in my public school, but my mother being one to always make sure that I was very cognizant of, where I come from and our roots as Black people in Oklahoma. And, coming on 100 years is really significant because I'm thinking too, and I'm not trying to stay on that fire motif, but I ended up meeting this wonderful producer, and they have a group out called Fire in Little Africa, and so referring to the Greenwood neighborhood as Little Africa. And again, this idea about fire and the destruction and the raising of Little Africa, the raising of the Greenwood neighborhood, but also sort of this fire in terms of this rekindling and this retaking off of the story and the people, again, reclaiming power in their narrative, in their story. And so Oklahoma, technically, geographically, we're Southern, but we're not necessarily culturally Southern, I say, because we missed the war when those lines were drawn. And so we have a lot more Midwestern tendencies coupled with some Southern tendencies. So a good little hodgepodge. But this idea, though, about resiliency among Black people in Oklahoma is very much so sort of ingrained in the DNA of our people. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Oklahoma, too, is, there were a lot of Black-led towns founded by Black people in Oklahoma. One particular small town now called Boley, Oklahoma, was, one like a community, for Black people, by Black people. We got, again, the Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa, and so many others. And so, again, this idea about resilience, this idea about rekindling, this idea about always wanting to reclaim a sense of power with our own story and with our own identity. It's very much what it means, I guess, to be Black and, coming from that place. And so, and I think, the history and the story of Black people in Oklahoma isn't told as much as, the tragic story of, Indigenous people being paraded forcibly, Trail of Tears to Oklahoma, meaning land of the red man, Indian territory, as it was previously called, but Black folks made our way there too. My ancestors that I was able to trace back as far as Arkansas. So I was able to actually locate a great grandfather who would have been born a slave in Arkansas, who then moved their way to Oklahoma. And I'm presuming, I don't know for a fact yet, but I'm presuming when they opened it up for the land run that my ancestors would have been a part of that. And so there would have been so many other Black people a part of that. And again, starting these these Black-led communities in the state. And so a running joke people tell me when I tell them I'm from Oklahoma is, are there Black people in Oklahoma? And I'm like, oh, most definitely. Black most people, we done infiltrated everywhere, Exactly. And look no further than our pro basketball team, and so, that's right. But the story of Black people in Oklahoma is definitely one of resilience and one of power in the face of much oppression, much marginalization.
I really want to encourage the people who are listening to this to look this up. Almost all of the specials that are out right now about Tulsa and the massacre are telling the story of Oklahoma. Two beautiful historians talking about these Black towns and Black people we're going to get up out of here and we're going to go over here and we're going to get this land and we're going to build and grow, and just the pride. I was so moved to learn all about that. Darrell, we are in a hot mess time, if we can say with fire, of just not unprecedented, but well documented racial oppression, violence against Black bodies. And I'm thinking about you growing up, Darrell, in Oklahoma and being a Black boy in America. How did you learn? I always love your confidence in yourself. How did you learn to love yourself? Ooh, and do you ever, go out over there. Do you ever have a hard time loving yourself? But how did you learn to love yourself? And if it ever gets tough, how do you get that love back?
Ooh, you just done got real. I'm not mad at it. That's why I'm here. Well, I'm just going to be very just honest and transparent with the folk and just say, that is an ever persisting challenge of trying to practice love of self. There has always also been in me a strong longing to get a better understanding of self, and then with better understanding to also have better love of self. But I'll say, I was, fortunate enough to have a good, strong community around me. When I say that, I think about my mother in particular, who always sort of, taught me, even in some of the flaws, ways in which to practice love of self and love of others. My mother always being one who would tell me, she's never going to be too good to say I'm sorry, and so where she might have made mistakes with me, to be able to take ownership and say I'm sorry. And I take that to heart as well, about how to practice love of myself, to also be able to say I'm sorry to myself in a sense. The sorry in a way in which I might not have loved myself well, give myself forgiveness, for some of the things I have fallen short of throughout the course of my life. Also giving myself, a sense of grace, recognizing that I'm not going to be able to get it all right all the time, but to, show up and always give the best effort I can give in any particular moment. And then I'm also thinking of another lesson I got from one of my cousins that's always stuck with me is when it comes to decision making, and being brought up, you're always kind of taught about, the right thing and the wrong thing. And again, this desire to always want to get it right and to do right and to do well and to not disappoint. But my cousin gave me something that I've never let go of. And she said, it's not always about making right or wrong decisions, but about being able to be at peace with your decisions.
That's good.
And by being able to give myself some peace, I've been able to give myself some love too. Again, recognizing that I'm not going to always get it right. And it's not always about getting it right. It's not always about getting it wrong. But if you're going to make a decision, stand in it, do one that you can be at peace with, and boldly walk, that path with your head held high. And so those are just a couple of the lessons that I've learned. But I'll just to say though, they've been hard fought lessons that I'm consistently even battling to this day.
Thank you, Darrell. That's beautifully said. This you and I both resonate with this concept of Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
I am who I am because you are who you are, or a person as a person through other persons, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, it seems to me that philosophy, those principles predate Christianity.
No, they do.
And they predate many of the world's major religions, almost all of which have some semblance of golden rule, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do unto others, don't do unto others, as you want done to you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about, kind of again, just growing up black, growing up black in America, in a container, in a context that just isn't good enough to kind of think about Donald Winnicott and good enough containers, good enough care. It's not good enough for people of color. It's not good enough for Black people. How did you learn to resonate with Ubuntu? What does that teach you about loving your posse, your people, the people around you? Can you connect that for us?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jack. You coming with the fire again. We just gonna keep that motif running.
That's right.
Yeah. And so the first thing that came to my mind. So one of my spiritual mentors who I did get a chance to meet one time, and I know he will never remember it, but I got to meet him, and that's Jeremiah Wright.
Oh, wow.
And I was listening to one of his conversations. It was on YouTube, which is, again, one of the benefits of technology is you actually can learn from folks that you might not ever get a chance to really sit in the same room with, but you can still learn from them or all the things that they've documented. But he was talking to a group of young ministers, and he was talking about how so many people are so eager to lead people without first learning how to love people or to be a lover of people. And that's what really kind of helped that Ubuntu idea start to settle inside of me. Because again, we can get so, and I'll say myself and others, but we could get so caught up in we'll say, clout chasing or, getting the shine, getting the fame, getting on top, directing people, shepherding people, whatever. But we don't first learn how to love people. And this notion of Ubuntu being rooted in a loving of people, a seeing of people, a celebration of people, and which then breeds a solidarity with people. But again, a deeper than just I'm gonna stand shoulder to shoulder with you, but rather there is a way in which I am connected. We are connected one to another. One of the ways I saw this illustrated actually was my very first time in a mosque. And it was so profound to me. And this is something that I really wish to figure out, like how to kind of incorporate in the church space. But I'm looking at the mosque, and, despite, my disagreements with the way in which the politics of the mosque persist. But I'm looking at the men, and I'm looking at the men stand shoulder to shoulder with one another. But then not only do they stand shoulder to shoulder, but they also prostrate themselves together, before God and with one another. And you just sort of listen to the rumbling of these men, these Black men I'm looking at, moving up and down, to stand in a position of power, but to essentially sort of, empty themselves, if you will, by laying prostrate, before God, one to another. And to me, that was such a powerful illustration about loving each other as well. And so how do I, as a Black man with Black people, get to a certain degree of loving of my people, a certain degree of intimacy with my people that transcends any sort of idea about brotherly love, transcends any sort of idea about an eros romantic love, but it really is the embodiment of that agape, love, where I will, gladly lay down not only my life for you, but I'll also lay down next to you. I will, if you're hurting, I will literally, lay down and hurt with you. If you are celebrating, I will literally stand up and I will celebrate with you. I will really give of myself in the fullness that I can, because again, I am me because you are you. And and if you can be the fullness of who you are, therefore I can be the fullness of who I am. And that's another learning, because Ubuntu wasn't an idea that I knew, 10 years ago. And so constantly trying to be reminded of that. And even in my personal life, the ways in which I want to practice Ubuntu with people in my own tribe, if you will. Whether it be the mother of my daughter, whether it be my own mother, my own father, my own siblings, my cousins, my closest friends. How do we live into Ubuntu with one another? And how do I practice a deep love of them and all that they bring?
Oh, that's gorgeous. Love Period will continue in a moment.
Many of us feel increasing anger at injustice, violence, and indifference in our world today. Join us March 14th for What Do I Do With My Anger? An online gathering featuring Richard Rohr and Brian McLaren. Learn ways of transforming anger into loving action. Inspired by Father Richard's new book, The Tears of Things. Register today at cac.org/anger. That's cac.org/ANGER.
I was thinking, just as you were saying that last piece, this idea of who's our posse, I think sometimes, Darrell, those of us who are social justice-y warriors like you and I are, like this, okay, that family in India that is dying, ravaged by COVID, right? Those are my people, right? The people in California when the fires are burning, those are my people, right? The Jews being persecuted, those are my people, right? The Sikhs being, those are my people. But your people are your people, right? Sometimes the people that are the hardest to love and who need our love the most, right, is cousin Bebe and them, or, your friend who really wounded you so deeply that it's hard for you to forgive that. A sibling, tortured by something, in your childhood that can't outgrow it. How do we love it? But your back home again son, I think Ubuntu relates to that as well. And I just love that you made it personal like that, right?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, and this is what just came to me in this moment, I think our immediate family is meant to be our practice ground for how we can then go out and then love members of our, I will say, extended family. if that makes sense.
That totally does. Totally does.
And one thing I say about some of these social justice warriors too, is because the idea too is also, how do we love self, right? Because I see Ubuntu as sort of, I call it like an expanded sense of self.
Yes,
like I love you too because I am you and you are me, right? And so it's an expanded self. So how are we practicing love of self? And I see so many social justice minded people, and I don't even know if they would say this about themselves, but this is what I perceive, is that oftentimes we will practice our love of neighbor. We'll go and stand at the picket line. We'll go to the rally. We'll go to the march, because it's so much easier to love the other than it is to practice loving ourselves.
Now, the young people, like you say, that's an entire word.
Oh, really? That's what they say?
That's what I've heard in the world. That is an entire word.
Mm-hmm.
It is the word, right? It is, our tradition says love your neighbor as yourself. Yes. And that as is an equal sign in the Greek. Yes. Well, maybe that's the problem, is we are actually loving our neighbors as ourselves, as in we don't love ourselves. So therefore, right? Mm-hmm. So therefore we don't love our neighbors. Like, how is it possible? You never learned to like you. You never learned to forgive you. You never learned to receive you. You never learned to have grace for yourself. That was your first practice. That was your first practice. Can I comfort myself? Darrell, think about, you got a baby girl coming. Think about the child who doesn't learn how to comfort themselves. Mm-hmm. Think about the inability to self-soothe, the inability to be alone and comfortable, and how, or to make it more positive, think about the ways that we could teach our children, you are enough.
Yes.
You are enough. And therefore, the organism that is past you, your mama, your first love object is your mama, you're the caregiver. We are one organism. And I don't think I ever heard King use the word Ubuntu, but he is talking about it when he says we're inextricably connected. I can't be fully who I am until you're fully who you are, which is to say he was getting that from Gandhi or from Thurman, all of these teachings that are ancient as the world. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll just say, I think, just to be real, and I might sound real churchy, I feel like he's just getting it from God. The same way Thurman did, the same way the Zulu did, the same way all of our ancient traditions did, and so, I think that just speaks to the universal truth that is evident, in life, that King is tapping into with that particular quote right there.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So, we are in the New York area doing our thing, and all around the globe, the issues are so similar. Scarce resources, mess up Mother Earth, consume what you can, whiteness on top of all the stuff, worry about immigration patterns, right? The power dynamic around land and identity that is the ongoing ubiquitous struggle between Palestine and Israel. Maybe I want to ask you, where does your heart break most about the world?
I think that's a good question. It's a little layered, because in the heartbreak, there is also, just to riff off you just slightly with a little bit of a Darrell paraphrase, there's also a fierce anger, if I may. Just a genuine, I genuinely feel a righteous anger at the way in which there are folks in the world who just choose to just legislate evil. And so within the heartbreak is that anger. But above that is the Black people around the world over, who are just consistently being denied dignity, being denied their humanity, and the way in which not just that they're being denied their humanity, but there's also, I think, an element of denial about their humanity. And what I mean by that is that all of us are, in fact, the same. All of us have same origins. All of us are, and I love Alice Walker's definition of womanism and the image of, our mother's gardens, right? And she asked the question about, why does the garden have all of these different colors of flowers in it? But I see that image as what Blackness actually is. Like Blackness, what it means to be Black is to encompass the entire spectrum of the rainbow, and whiteness is an attempt to disassociate itself from that rainbow. It's an attempt to be set apart. And I use that word intentionally, but in a sacrilegious way, from that rainbow, right? They think it's holy, but in fact, it's sacrilege in the way in which they choose to be set apart. And so my heart breaks in the way in which we fail to see, again, back to this idea about Ubuntu, back to this idea about an expanded self, that we fail to see ourselves and the other. And it's not that to see ourselves means that we have to be the same, but that we're kin.
Yep.
That we have common blood, that we have a common origin, that all of us originate from the Black continent and from the Black soil and from the motherland, if you will, and so for us to see that and to claim that, then it's like, then in my imagination, hopefully it's a moral imagination and not a fantastical imagination or a naive imagination, but for us to see ourselves in the other, and to then, when we do that, there's no reason to pit one above or one below, right? Because we are all the same. We are all equal before God and equal before one another. And therefore, we not only treat each other that way, but we ensure to create policies and to enact practices that protect that equality also. And so, so there's some layers to that heartbreak, but mostly it's just that I pray we get to a place in the world where we can see ourselves genuinely in the other. And therefore we work to protect that other. We work to heal that other. We work to love that other. We aspire for justice for that other, because in that other is also me, and vice versa.
Oh yeah, that's so good. And the heartbreak, your heart breaks because you love. I think an indifferent heart, an unfeeling heart, an unseeing heart, is a heart that does not own that interconnectedness, or does not own that common root. That we are all from the same place. We are all of us Africans, if you will, in our ontologically, right? Biologically. So
but we've been taught for so long how negative Africa is. We don't want to claim it as home.
And you took yourself, right, for your 30th
I sure
birthday.
did. I did.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Where did you go? Remind me.
Kenya. I was in Kenya. I went to Nairobi and then down to Mombasa.
Oof. One year, John and I did South Africa, Namibia, Zambia. Went up to Ghana, and in every place, from Cape Hope to Accra, to see the people who are my people. To go to those slave castles, though, you need some Xanax after that. It's quite painful.
There's actually one I wasn't aware of in Mombasa.
Yeah,
it's called Fort Jesus, as a matter of fact.
Oh no.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
And so many people, not including you in this, but so many people don't think that the slave trade took place on the eastern shores of Africa as well. And so to see that was very eye-opening. But I want to put on the record, in case it doesn't get edited out, but just for the podcast, one of these days I pray Jacqui takes me to South Africa and Namibia and all over
Zambia
Africa
and all those
and Zambia. Yeah, so I can see my people too. So just want to put that out there for the record.
I think it's a worthwhile trip, especially. We'll do that a whole nother conversation about how South Africa and America, like how they learned apartheid from us, right? They really learned it well. Love, just as we think about maybe coming to a close, I do want to ask you two questions. And one is, maybe, do you think that does love have power to heal the world?
Oh, almost code switched, but most definitely. I almost forgot where I was.
Did you want to say hell yeah? Is that?
Oh yeah, that's where I was going with it. That's exactly where I was going.
I love that. So tell me what do you know for sure about love?
Yeah.
What do you know for sure about love?
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I know for sure that love will always persist. Love will always outlive us. Love predates us. Love also transcends us. But I also believe that love is complicated because love does not always look like we might want it to look. It might not always feel like we want it to feel. And I ain't talking about no toxic love. Some of us know what it's supposed to feel like and what it's supposed to look like. I want to be very clear about that. But there are also ways in which love can look like a fire. And the reason why I say that is it makes me think about an image from graduate school. We were at the Kennedy Space Museum and talking about the stars and talking about creation. And, up close on one of those stars, it looks like you in the middle of hell itself, in the middle of a volcano, fire, lava, heat, destruction, toxic gas, the whole 9 yards. But when you zoom out far enough, you can see creation happening. And those are worlds being formed and stars being created and planets being shaped and galaxies coming together. And it's so beautiful to behold, And so that image for me encapsulates how I perceive God and God's movement in the world, how I perceive love in the world. And again, it might not always look like we might want it to look. It might not always feel like we want it to feel, but it's imperative that we hold on to a sense of faith and trust in the God who is love, that God is working it all out together for good. For those of them who just quote it all the way out, for those who love the Lord and call according to the Lord's purpose, and so trusting in that, and trusting in that, that sense of a zoomed out sort of view and perspective of the whole, of what it is God and what it is that love is doing in the universe for the sake of creating something new.
Well, Darrell, that's just a beautiful place to land today. Thank you. Wishing you so much love today.
Well, thank you. It was such a pleasure to be with you as always, and to just share and to just talk. It's so wonderful to be a part of this team and to get a chance to learn from you and with you. And so thank you so much for, again, this opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, love. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Love Period is
Corey Big,
Paul Swanson,
Izzy Spitz,
Sarah Janzak,
Jenna Kuiper,
Sarah Palmer,
Nicholas Kramer,
and I'm Calista Brewster. This podcast is produced by the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is located in the heart of New Mexico, thanks to the generosity of our supporters. We also have other podcasts you might like. You can find those wherever you like to listen by searching for Center for Action and Contemplation, or visit us at cac.org to find out more about our other programs. From the high desert of New Mexico, we wish you peace and every good.